Hello, and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Tucker.
And I'm Alex. Today we will be making a drinking game for Gremlins 2, the new batch directed by Joe Dante and written by Charles Hawes.
In Gremlins 2, Billy and Kate move to New York and work for a multi-billionaire named Daniel Clamp. In the building, Billy happens to find out that they found Gizmo and are keeping him locked up in an area for animal experimentation. After Billy manages to free Gizmo, he of course gets wet, multiplies, the other Mogwai eat, and are born as gremlins.
They then proceed to wreak havoc in the Clamp Tower where Billy works, and it is once again up to him and Kate to save the day against the Gremlins, who now have access to a new variety of mutations that make them even harder to get rid of.
Just a quick reminder, we will be talking about spoilers in this movie, so if you have not seen the movie, we recommend that you go and watch it now. But of course with our drinking rules that will be posted on screen now. Now without delay, let's move on to the discussion where we will bring up all the rules and the total number of drinks that go alongside them.
As always, first rule is death. You see a death, you take a sip from your beverage. For this movie, we only included 2 deaths, and the main reason is we only really included things that we could definitively make out. There were probably a lot more. Considering the Clamp Tower probably had a lot more deaths, but we didn't really include them just because you couldn't confirm them really.
Yeah, it was unconfirmed. And one of the reasons we did that is because apparently in the last movie, in the first installment, Mr. and Mrs. Futterman didn't actually die from the snowplow, and somehow they're in this movie, but it was definitely implied in that movie that they died and got run over.
I was 90% sure that they died, and especially since last time it was my first time seeing, you can't really blame us too much.
Well, yeah,
they should have been dead, realistically.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Or at least talked about why they're in the next movie.
I don't think it was even brought up.
Bring up their injuries or something, but they didn't even do that.
They brought up the last movie, but I don't think they really brought up how they miraculously survived getting run over.
Exactly. So moving on to the second rule, it's obviously screams, cries, and yells. And there's not much to say for this one other than there was 15 times it happened.
Yeah.
So 15 drinks then.
Yeah. Let's keep it rolling with whenever you see a gremlin death, you drink, which also happens to be 15.
Yeah.
A lot of gremlins die. As you can see, the whole building was basically filled with them, and they got destroyed by the end of the movie for the most part.
Yeah.
There was a few scenes that were mercied to be, for full disclaimer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that being said, that's why it only came to 15. But there were some pretty gruesome gremlin deaths.
Oh yeah. And I'm glad that they kept the deaths like that for the second installment. The first one had cool gremlin deaths, and now this one does as well. The one gremlin that was shredded alive. That one was super cool.
Yeah, and there was even a gremlin that the brain gremlin shot in the face. It was just kind of out of nowhere, but it's just kind of the whole tone of the movie. It's silly.
Yeah. Well, that's what Gremlins is, really.
Yeah, and then there is obviously the bat gremlin death who turned into stone, but we'll assume he's dead.
Well, yeah. And just sticking with the Gremlins, rule number 4 is whenever one of the Gremlin rules is said.
Yeah.
Just obey the rules, that's all.
Oh, the rules.
Remember the first one? Don't let them get exposed to bright light, especially sunlight, because it kills them.
Right.
And that resulted in 6 drinks.
Yeah. It also led to probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie, where the workers are just consistently questioning Billy about the full logistics of the gremlin rules. So what if you feed the gremlin at 8 a.m.? Is that fine? Or just silly things like that. What if you're in one time zone and you go over to a different time zone? Is it still the same for that time zone, or where is it?
Yeah.
So I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's something I've always thought about too, just hearing the gremlin rules. You can't feed them after midnight. It's okay, so when can I start feeding them after midnight? When does that feeding window open up?
Yeah.
I always wondered that. It's funny that they address it in this movie.
Yeah, the movie gets very meta for the most part, as you can see in some later scenes for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Rule number 5, though, is if a gremlin rule is broken. Of course, this happens either intentionally or non-intentionally, so we had to bring it back for this movie. It resulted in 8 total sips.
Mm-hmm. So now moving on to rule number 6, it's whenever there's a new type of gremlin shown. That resulted in 11 sips for this movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the more entertaining or interesting parts about the movie that happens that's different from the original one, I'd say.
Yeah. I feel like some of these we could have all easily missed as well, and it's really left up to interpretation. We had some great gremlins in there. Obviously, there was a brain gremlin who could talk. There was the flasher gremlin who just flashed someone even though he doesn't really have reproductive organs.
And we saw the flasher gremlin in the first one too, but this
Yeah.
one he just came back and
Yeah.
he was. I laugh at that guy every time I see him.
Yeah.
And then of course there was the female gremlin, the Wicked Witch gremlin. Some of the other notable ones, I guess, are the Bat Gremlin, and then the Spider Gremlin is another one.
Yeah. My personal favorite is the Phantom of the Opera Gremlin. The reason he's my favorite is just because all of them are taking serums where he just gets splashed in the face with acid.
Yeah.
And as a result, all he does is just like holds up like the Phantom of the Opera face.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm different too. I just love how it's very intentionally just meant to be humorous.
Yeah.
It really, again, like matches the mood of the whole Gremlins movie.
Yeah.
So 7th rule we have is whenever you see something on TV, you take a sip, which ended up with 22. To clarify this, we only took 1 sip per show that was shown on the TV. So if you're taking 5 sips per like every TV that's there, but it's all showing the same thing, you're probably going to have a harder time than us.
Yeah. So we just took the 1 sip if it's all the same show on multiple TVs. So now I'll go on to rule number 8, which is whenever you hear Gizmo's song, which resulted in 4 drinks. And we felt like this was a good rule to add because A, it has to do with Gizmo, who's one of the main gremlins that we like, and we just needed to cool down the number a little bit and have an easier rule involved, I guess.
And that takes us to rule number 9, which is whenever a gremlin takes a mutation serum, you take a sip. And that gave us 9 total sips. This rule is just kind of there to show that there's a changing point from when the gremlins reach point A to point B and like they're actually evolving. So it's kind of like a twist that the last movie didn't have.
Yeah, exactly. It's something unique that the sequel did.
Yeah.
And now we'll just move on to our final rule for this drinking game, which is whenever clamp is said. And this is easily the highest number of drinks for this game, which resulted in 25 sips.
Now, for those of you who have cable TV at home, the Clamp Cable Network is located right here in the building.
And now that brings us to the drinking totals. The drinking totals for this movie came out to 117 sips, which is just under 4 standard 12-ounce cans, according to our 30 sip per can scale anyways.
Yeah. And one of the other rules that we wanted to include in this drinking game that ultimately it didn't quite make the cut was when gremlins were throwing things. That one we had in our previous Gremlins drinking game as well. But yeah, like I said, it just didn't make the cut for this movie.
So this movie's kind of weird in the sense where it had, I feel like, some problems in it, but at the very same time, there were so many things that they did much better in this one, I'd say, as well.
Yeah, it is a weird predicament, I guess, that they're in by doing this. Like, I guess we'll just start with the bad things.
Yeah.
So starting off with something that might be a little bit nitpicky, but it's something that we just felt like they could have done, is because it's set in New York, we kind of wanted to see the Gremlins just go through and tear up the city. And in the way that they did it, it kind of feels like Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's supposed to be set in New York, but 90% of the movie's on a boat and you barely get to see Manhattan and anything. And I kind of feel like it plays out similarly to that, but it's just something I would have liked to see.
Yeah, definitely. Once I heard the story takes place in New York, I feel like they would have went around like the skyscrapers, like the Statue of Liberty even, like just kind of done some silly things in there, try to like rip off the head of it, some like slapstick type of things, but they didn't do that, and I think it's probably just because of budgets was really holding it back. I'm not 100% sure, but or maybe they just wanted it in the tower and like New York was just kind of there, but I feel like it's a little bit of a missed opportunity.
Another thing that we felt was kind of dated was the Gremlins and their effects and kind of like how they're moving, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess one good example of that is Gizmo in this movie did not look great. He looked like kind of a shell of his former self, especially like his movements felt just bad and came up flat a lot of the times. One other thing is the Bat Gremlin clearly looked like a puppet. In saying that, like there were times where it basically felt like a scene straight out of The Bird, which was made like almost 30 years before, which is a really bad sign in a sense. Like it felt like it was just kind of CGI and like layered over top. I didn't believe that like the Bat Gremlin was like actually there. One other problem that I had with the movie is occasionally, like a lot of the times the comedy from the Gremlins was good, but some of the times it just went flat. I'll say. So for example, like there was Gizmo trying to do his whole Rambo thing, and I just felt like I didn't like it all that much. He's supposed to be like this adorable, like little innocent character, but they try to give him like some spunk and personality, and I just thought it was a little bit cringy.
Yeah.
People can think differently, go for it, but it didn't work for me.
Yeah, that's fair. And speaking about Gizmo, it's just they kind of made him seem more stupid, and he didn't have that much charm, or like his charm didn't really work in this one as much as it did in the first one. Like in the first one, he had so much charm, and you just kind of loved the little guy. But in this one, it just, I don't know.
In this
something
movie,
was weird.
he just kind of felt stupider in this movie.
Yeah.
Like in almost every way. So you liked Gizmo significantly less.
Yeah, exactly.
Even the Gremlins at time, I feel like their comedy was more or less like flat out stupid and just like childish instead of just like actually like kind of poking fun at something. However, I will say when they hit, they struck gold.
Yeah.
Like some of my favorite scenes is like the elevator alarm when Kate says like sounding alarm or whatever, and the Gremlins are just trying to replicate alarms.
Yeah.
I found that hilarious.
Sound alarm.
One thing that I thought was pretty funny was the old film critic was reviewing the first movie.
Yeah.
And then the Gremlins come in and they just attack him.
Yeah.
Like, it's the film's meta moments that are just gold. Like, the whole movie.
Definitely. Or even the scene where like the movie just kind of goes blank for a second, and then Hulk Hogan's like yelling at the Gremlins in the theater. You're just like, wait, what's happening?
Sorry, folks. It won't happen again.
I think by far my favorite character in the movie, though, is Daniel Clamp. He was a parody of Donald Trump, clearly.
Yeah, of course.
But it's weird how to say that it dated so well, knowing what Donald Trump is now.
It seems almost more relevant now.
Yeah. He was just a millionaire who didn't give a shit.
Yeah. And one example of him not giving a shit about money is the tower was getting destroyed, and he said it was a good thing, but he probably lost millions of dollars in that. So like, I don't know, it just made it cartoonish because he was likable because of him not caring about the money.
Yeah, he was a very driven person in this movie, and I feel like he was driven by cocaine.
It's a good possibility.
Like, there was a lot of scenes where it's just like, oh yeah, this painting's really, really good. Where'd you get it from? And it just seems like he had like aneurysms of like somebody who's just constantly on coke. And he's just like, oh no, the building's destroyed. That's fine, that's fine. What's the city from? We're gonna make a city now.
Yeah.
But either way, it just felt like so like slapstick almost, and I feel like it's low-key like alluding to the fact that almost all business moguls are probably fueled by coke.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. Another instance that I thought was pretty funny was the Canadian-themed restaurant where the servers were dressed like RCMP officers, and I'm curious if that's actually a real restaurant or not. I went to New York once and I never saw it, but I'm curious if it is.
But overall, like, I liked the movie. It was very weird to see Christopher Lee in the film, though. I think the first thing that he did when he got onto set is he apologized to Joe Dante for being in The Howling 2.
Yeah, and the reason he apologized is obviously because Joe Dante directed the first Howling.
Yeah.
So
He probably also felt bad because The Howling 2 kind of sucked.
yeah. So with all that being said, what were your overall thoughts on the film?
Overall, I liked the movie. Like, again, I said that it had some weaknesses, but I feel like that's I guess undershadowed just kind of by its strengths, more or less. The movie had a lot of scenes where it had good setup and great payoff. So in saying that, like, I understand why people find this movie better than the first one.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still kind of torn. Like, I can take or leave any other movie, but they're both good movies for sure.
Yeah, different, like, they're good for different reasons. Like, we mentioned the different types of gremlins in this movie. I liked that more than the last one.
Yeah, definitely.
But, like, Gizmo in the first one was far and above this one. So, like you were saying, there's so many things better from the first one than this one, and then vice versa. So, like, I agree with you. It is hard to pick which one I would rank higher than the other.
Mm-hmm.
But in saying that, let's move on to the Darwin Awards, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee the Darwin Award. This award goes out to the character who made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, someone else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have easily been avoided. This award can also be given to a character who is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Gizmo, for exiting Billy's desk and getting wet as a result. This in turn leads to creating the sequence of events to happen.
The only other nominee that we have is the security guard that pointed a gun at Billy without even taking his warning into consideration, and then putting Billy under arrest and taking him to the police station, despite him seeing firsthand how dangerous the Gremlins can be. With Billy being at the police station, it gave the cocoons enough time to hatch and caused the building to fall into complete chaos.
And the winner is the security guard. You know, for somebody whose job it is to protect the building he's looking after, he manages to get rid of the only person who knows how to deal with the Gremlins and can save the building. Also coming from Canada, security guards do not have guns, and this cop shows us why, because he fires a stray bullet fending off the Gremlin that could have easily put somebody's life at risk.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into Gremlins 2, the new batch. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know in the comments which Gremlin was your favorite in this movie.
Just a reminder for you guys, please vote for one of the 4 nominees for Horror Tuber of the Month. The link to the nomination video is in the description below. Also make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next week's episode, where we'll be picking up with Christmas themed horror movies again with Black Christmas. If you want to check out our most recent video on Gremlins, click on the box on the top right, or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games and horror movies we review, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying, cheers to fears.